Hi, Gary Stearman here, and this is Prophecy Watchers. Stay with us. We're going to talk about a wonderful book. And that book is Power Quest. It's a book in 2 volumes by author Douglas Woodward, and Doug is here with us today. And I really love your books.
Thank you.
You're a good writer.
Thank you.
You're better than I am.
I don't know about that, but I appreciate the thought.
But your books are not only cogent, and they are right in the middle of what's happening in the United States today. In other words, you've analyzed our culture from a Christian perspective in a way that I just really like to see in print.
I appreciate that. Well, it certainly begins with trying to understand the history of where, how have we gotten to where we are today? And of course, in another program, we've talked a bit about the possibility that America is Babylon, and which I believe. But the real question is, well, okay, let's assume for a second that that's true. How did we get there? And what I attempt to do in these 2 books, Power Quest, is really document the step-by-step progression for getting from this wonderful republic founded in 1776 and so forth, and how we've gotten to where we are today, which is perhaps the power base of the future Antichrist. And so a lot of that history gets into the spiritualism, the supernatural, and so forth. The title, Power Quest, the obvious question is Power Quest, okay, what power are you seeking and who's seeking it and so forth. The Power Quest really goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. It goes back to the promise that talking snake made to Adam and Eve regarding, biting that apple, the knowledge of good and evil. If you'll take a bite of that tree, you shall be as gods. All right? Well, that sounded pretty good. That even sounded better than the taste of the apple. And so that's really where it began. And the question is, well, how then in America have we tried to become as gods? What has caused us to do that? What practices have we put in place to ascend to that position?
And before he could sell the idea of becoming as gods, they must have known. They must have had some idea about there's something up there that's better than what I am, and I'd like to go there. And behind civilization, behind Western civilization, there is this thought.
Yes.
That goes all the way through history, comes right down to the present day, and I think you've done a marvelous job of documenting that.
Well, thank you. Well, yeah, and so if we pick up the story with America, and go look at sort of early America, which really a lot of the history of American spiritualism revolves around the state of New York and sort of upper state New York and western New York. And you had a number of really interesting characters. One of the most famous is the Poughkeepsie Seer, Andrew Jackson Davis. And he was something of a magician, but he began to be able to supposedly heal people. And there was another fellow named Henry Steele Alcott. And Henry Steele Alcott had formerly been in the Civil War, had a detective group, actually was involved in the arrest of John Wilkes Booth. But nevertheless, Alcott was writing for a paper in New York, wanted to do something more than just the stuff he was writing about, and he wanted to get serious. So he went to see the Poughkeepsie Seer. And while he was there, he bumped into this lady with this thick Russian accent, whose name was Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. Well, the 2 of them became fast friends. They moved back to New York, and they began the Theosophical Society. But this was kind of a later stage. The American interest in spiritualism goes back to even George Washington, Anton Mesmer. Lafayette recommended Mesmer to Washington as he was the bee's knees. He had new ideas that George should know about. So Washington actually wrote a letter to to Mesmer, talking about how he would be a great man someday.
Well,
So,
and if I could interrupt,
Yes, please.
Mesmer used to put on great big theatrical productions,
Indeed.
and he would hypnotize people in front of the crowd, and he became a huge, huge figure.
he was a phenomenon. He
was.
really was, and he was a factor in this interest in spiritualism in America. There was this thing called the burned out districts in New York, and there was a great deal of spiritual interest. Some of it was very genuine Christianity, but a lot of it, unfortunately, went into the occult, into the paranormal. And so, sort of picking up the story with Blavatsky and Alcott, they formed the Theosophical Society. And the Theosophical Society was built a lot around a couple of her books, The Secret Doctrine, Isis Unveiled. Well, these were significant books in the history and the revival of a Buddhist type of mentality or spiritualism. Actually, Buddhism was almost on the way out, and it was Henry Steele Alcott and the books that he wrote and that Blavatsky wrote that re-energized Buddhism and spiritualism. Eventually, you get to a guy named Harry Houdini. Mm-hmm. You get to the parlor tricks and all of the seances and so forth that became a big, big part of American culture right at the turn of the 19th to 20th century.
Now, this is America we're talking about. America, the Christian nation. America founded on godly principles, and people like to talk about that, and I like to talk about it. But on the other hand, we have to realize that there is the dark side, and it's always trying to upset the work of the Lord.
Indeed.
And this is the amazing part.
It is amazing. There are two other threads that I could mention that spring out of this, I'll call it a milieu, good French word, or kind of a stew.
A stew,
kind
yes.
of a stew, the milieu. And one of them is Mormonism, and the other one is Freemasonry. And both of these became very significant in American culture, as we know. The Mormon Church, huge, one of the fastest growing religions in the world. And Joseph Smith discovered the Golden Tablets in Western New York.
Now, the title of your book is Power Quest.
Right.
A quest for power.
Yes.
And you're talking about the dark side.
Yes.
And America has a dark side, and I've read your book.
Right.
Both volumes.
You wrote a nice foreword to it, too, also. Thank you. It was a great foreword.
And I meant it, by the way.
Yes, I appreciate the kind words.
Because Doug is a great writer and goes the extra little mile to make your reading not only informative, but just entertaining. He pulls you right along. Now, the Power Quest, the dark side, is something we sort of need to know about. And why do we need to know about that?
Well, it ultimately influences the religion that we find ourselves sort of covered over with. Ultimately, it will get to the ancient aliens religion of E.T., but before it gets there, there is a series of steps. In Book 2, I begin to get more into the influence of Nazism and the occult nature of the Nazi worldview and how it was influenced by the Theosophical Society that had sprung up in America, but how also the works of Goethe and Faust,
yes.
The concept of what the supernatural world is. You had a couple of other books, one of them in particular is Bulwer Lytton's discussion about the Vril.
Yes.
And that was sort of the English occultism, the idea of the Vril being these people that lived underneath the surface of the earth in a hollow earth. And it gave rise to the Vril Society, Maria Orszag in Germany. Who was eventually sucked into what was known as the Thule group and so forth.
Yes.
This was a big part of German occultism. And occultism influenced, as we know, Heinrich Himmler and the SS, as well as Adolf Hitler. And so this interchange between American occultism and German occultism became a very interesting phenomenon.
You know, the fascinating thing is, and I'm listening to you, we had the start of a kind of an underground here, an obsession with the occult, which hopped across the Atlantic to the Germans.
That's right.
Developed over there, and then it hopped back again after World War II.
Indeed.
And you write about that.
Right, yeah. Well, in fact, as we get into what occurred in World War II, certainly one of the key things that happened was an interest on the part of the Germans in learning how to use a certain type of telepathy that became known as remote viewing. And the concept of, I call it Dr. Greenbaum. And Dr. Greenbaum, which is the green tree, this was research that was done probably by our friend Josef Mengele and a number of the Nazis, trying to understand how can they use remote viewing to be used as a weapon of war. The Russians, of course, picked up on what the Nazis were doing. Originally, America didn't have much, the U.S. Army didn't have much interest, but it began to get a lot of interest through a fascinating character named Andrija Puharich. Andrija Puharich, we could talk about a program just about him, but his influence in the whole concept of what the military did with telepathy and so forth becomes a fascinating story. And I'll pause there for a moment.
Well, you know, I just wanted to say that where Doug is heading is in a surprising direction, and I want you to stick with us because you need to know about this. We've all heard about the Antichrist, and we've all said, is he alive today? Who is he? What's he doing? How does that really work? And you come at it from a different direction, and we're going to continue in just a moment. First, I'd like to remind everybody that at Prophecy Watchers, we have the Prophecy Watcher, a monthly magazine. I'd like to tell you how you can get your own subscription.
Each month, the Prophecy Watcher magazine arrives in thousands of mailboxes all around the world. Our newly expanded 48-page magazine features cutting-edge articles written by the top prophecy experts, writing about things you may never hear about in church. Examine the giants of Genesis 6, the future wars prophesied for Israel, the rapture of the church, prophecies about the Antichrist and the tribulation, the rebuilt Jewish temple, the book of Revelation, transhumanism, artificial intelligence, and so much more. You can subscribe to the digital version of the Prophecy Watcher for $20 a year. Subscribe to the print version for $30 a year. Or for a very limited time, we're offering a lifetime subscription to either the digital for $100 or the print magazine for $150. It's the gift that just keeps on giving. Just call the toll-free number on the screen or visit our online bookstore at prophecywatchers.tv to take advantage of this limited time offer.
And now let's continue with Power Quest, America's obsession with the paranormal, because this study, it could get very, very, very dark.
It does.
But on the other hand, as Christians, we have a different view of what's going on here, and it has to do with the Antichrist.
Yes. Ultimately, that is the subtitle of Book 2 is The Ascendancy of Antichrist in America. And again, here I'm laying the groundwork based upon spiritual issues. We didn't talk, I don't think, about Paul's and Bergier and The Morning of the Magician, but that book, a book by two Frenchmen in 1960, talked a lot about German occultism and what it consisted of. That all kind of came into America with a thing called Project Paperclip. There's a picture of Wernher von Braun and 103 other scientists that came through the auspices of the OSS and Allen Dulles. And Paperclip comes from the fact that there was a paperclip on the dossiers of these individuals, and lies were told about them to hide their Nazi past, including von Braun, who happened to be a member of the SS, and was involved in some pretty nasty things at the Pilsen Works.
But he launched our space program.
And so you have a lot of this German occultism coming in with this huge number of Nazis that came into America. Why did we bring Nazis into America? To fight against Bolshevism. We believe that the Nazis hated the communists as much as we did, and so they felt it was justified. Allen Dulles and John J. McCloy and some of these other noteworthy individuals.
Right.
A fellow named Prescott Bush.
And by the way, rocket science came out of that.
Absolutely.
And the race between Russia and the United States to see who could build the most ICBMs.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Of course, we famously know about the race to the moon and so forth, and von Braun, and there were a series of important Germans, Walter Dornberger, Theodor Rudolph, Werner von Braun I've mentioned, Hermann Oberth. There's just a fascinating study. In fact, I think the book I did on Mars we might mention as well, but there's a number of Germans that were involved in the space program. And that space program issue becomes a very prominent factor in not only the moon race, but the race to Mars.
The book to which he refers is called Lying Wonders of the Red Planet, Exposing the Lie of Ancient Aliens. And again, you go places where few authors go.
Yeah, where only angels dare to tread.
But you make a point, and that's what I would like you to talk about.
Right,
Your point is?
Yeah, the point is that the space program was heavily influenced, as was other factors in our military-industrial complex, by the Nazis. The space program ultimately became, as two fellows named Richard Hoagland and Mike Barrett talk about, they talk about NASA, and they talk about the war between the Freemasons and the Nazi occultists, and the Nazi occultists ultimately won that battle. And that is a fascinating study in its own right, and how that ritualism influenced our space program.
That system, the system you're writing about, going all the way back to Madame Blavatsky,
right,
and coming forward, is still in existence.
Yes, absolutely.
And you make the point that out of that may come the Antichrist.
I believe that is absolutely the case. You have, again, this spiritualism in the United States that influences things. The Nazis played a very, very significant role in that. I didn't mention Reinhard Gehlen. Gehlen was the responsible person for the Soviet desk in Germany. He was a Nazi. And what happened was that all of this desk, about 30 or so spies, came into the OSS / eventually CIA under Dulles. And again, they had a huge impact upon our understanding of the Soviet Union and what was going on there. And so it ultimately moves, though, into an awareness of the diabolical, the evil. And the point where I go, which we won't probably have time to get into very much, is the influence of the work of Josef Mengele in the technique that we could call dissociative identity disorder. As it turns out, there's a long story which I document, which talks about there was a book by a guy named John Marks called The Search for the Manchurian Candidate. The Manchurian Candidate, the older folks will know that movie with Frank Sinatra and so forth. A remake done with Denzel Washington not so long ago. But the concept was, what will enable us to create spies that basically have no will of their own? They simply follow orders. So they're willing to murder, to whatever they need to do do their objective. They tried drugs, they tried hypnotism, they tried LSD, they tried mescaline, and John Marks says it all fails. But John Marks didn't go into what the real technique was, which is discovered that this was something that Mengele had learned and had taught, I believe, to the CIA. And it was how to dissociate personalities and create personalities that follow orders. And this became part of what today is generally called satanic ritual abuse, dissociative identity disorder, SRADID. And this is part of the story as well. It's a particularly evil aspect of what was taught by the Nazis in our, we'll call them social sciences, and its effects upon our society are still dramatic today, as a Russ Dizdar would tell you.
Now,
Yes.
having said that, and I think made a point, for Christians, why is it important to know about this in just a short sentence or two?
People that have been affected by DID are everywhere. I even had, I found out when I was working with a professor at the University of Oklahoma when I was teaching, that even he had a story, his wife was affected by this. There are not just tens of thousands, maybe not just hundreds of thousands, maybe millions or more Americans that have been influenced by this technique, and that they are, in effect, somewhat programmed in what we would call DID.
And let me stop you right
Yeah.
there. And I'm watching society today, and I'm seeing the most awful trends in society, in public school, in business, and finance. Everywhere, people are showing up with bizarre ideas. And where do they get those ideas? And maybe you have an answer.
There's a possibility that a lot of these, horrible killings, spree killings that are done may be done by individuals that have been programmed. We don't like to talk about this, but it's actually something that's even in medical dictionaries and so forth. It's a real phenomenon. Many wards and hospitals have this influence of personalities, and it goes beyond demon possession.
But it may involve social planning.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
The leaders of social planning of
Right.
various types.
It appears, and I make the argument, this was talked about and discussed in 1975 at the Otis Pike and Frank Church committees in the Senate, where some of the more clandestine and perhaps evil activities of the CIA were disclosed and put into the congressional record.
Wow.
It was talked about again in 1995 under the Clinton administration, where it was talked about again how this type of programming occurs even at that time. It was supposed to have stopped back in 1975. It didn't stop. It continues.
Let's pause for just a moment, and you can find out how you can get your very own copies of Power Quest, Volumes 1 and 2.
Prolific author Doug Woodward has been a good friend of this ministry for many years. His exhaustive research into some dark places and ominous subjects may leave you feeling a bit overwhelmed and wondering if all these things are actually true. Did the Third Reich create flying saucer technology? Does NASA have a dark occult side with demonic connections? Was there angelic life on the planet Mars in the ancient past? And did it once experience a nuclear catastrophe? You'll find these subjects and so much more in Doug's 2 sensational books covering almost 700 pages of amazing and often shocking research. We'd like to make either of Doug's Power Quest books available to you for your gift of $30 or more, with free shipping offered anywhere in the USA. Just call us toll-free at the number you see on your screen or visit our online bookstore at prophecywatchers.tv. When you order both books from Prophecy Watchers for your gift of $60 or more, we have 2 special bonuses waiting for you. The first free bonus is Doug's deep dive into the ancient alien theory, Lying Wonders of the Red Planet. Doug explores the life of Nikola Tesla, the possibility of an ancient planet the Bible calls Rahab, and the rumors of monuments and pyramids on Mars. Doug's book may be your introduction to time travel, jump rooms, wormholes, and the real story behind the Hollywood movie Argo, a fascinating read. The second free bonus is Jeff Kinley's book, Uncovering the Secrets of Bible Prophecy, where Jeff sets the record straight on what the Bible really says about the end times and how we can separate truth from fiction. Both of these books are yours for free when you order the Doug Woodward Power Quest package, a $60 or more investment with free shipping included on these 4 books anywhere in the USA. I guarantee you, you will never see so much fascinating information jammed into over 1,000 pages. Thanks for supporting the work of Prophecy Watchers and Doug Woodward's continuing research into some curious and important subjects. God bless you all as we search for the truth from the ancient past and God's plan for the future of America.
Doug Woodward is his name, and he writes about things that are extremely complex. The thing I like about your writing is that it's easy to read. I mean, and you make the complex simple, and you talk about things from a perspective that very few people actually touch upon. The idea of what's happening in our society today, and we're all watching, and we're saying, where in the world did that come from?
Exactly.
Someone publishes a paper that is generated a method of teaching, goes all the way down through the public school system, and when you read it, you're flabbergasted. Where did this come from? Well, I think that your books really document these things.
Yeah, I think that this has all been architected. Now, I'm admittedly a conspiracy theorist, but as I think it was Gore Vidal said, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I'm a conspiracy reporter. And so these things are real, and of course the documentation that I do talks about these things.
But you maintain a Christian perspective.
I do.
And I've known Doug for some years now, and we've had a lot of conversations. And where are we going spiritually in America? Let's just kind of do a little detour here.
Well, I wish that I could predict that we're going to see a great revival in our nation. Some believe that we will. I hope that's true. Yes. But it doesn't appear from my vantage point that that is likely to be the case. Unfortunately, these concepts have worked their way through our colleges, our universities, down into the millenniums or the millennials, Generation Z and so forth. Right. And so the younger folks have been kind of brought up believing a lot of these things. Certainly spirituality, the New Age movement, a lot of these things are really based upon similar spiritual concepts that, as I talked about, kind of grew up in early America and have tended to be brought forward. It is, I don't want this to be a pun, but it is the nature of the beast.
You know, the Bible tells us to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves, and that describes you.
I don't know if my wife would agree.
But what I'm saying is that when it comes to the dark side and the things that have undermined American society, you do a great job of research.
You have to be a little bit brave to make some of the statements that I'm making.
But we need to know about it.
I believe that we do, because it influences our lives and the people that we know and many of the people that we love.
His name is Doug Woodward, and he's a great author, a great writer, I should say. Technically speaking and stylistically speaking,
thank you.
An easy read. Today, we're going through a dark period, and you might just find some hope, a little uplift in reading about the real story of the dark side. Thanks a lot, Doug.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
I'm Gary Stearman. Hey, you keep watching. We are